Get your big boy pants on in studio, in the house, live. Denver Riggleman. Denver is running for governor. He's a Republican. That'll be decided in a mega June 13th primary. About 600,000 people expected to show up and vote in the Republican primary. Who are the candidates? Well, Ed Gillespie, Frank Wagner. We just heard from him at the 7:30 hour. And Corey Stewart, chairman of the Prince William County, and Denver Riggleman. Who's Denver Riggleman? Well, he's a veteran. He's a former Air Force intel officer for some time. And so he shot terrorists and he makes whiskey now. And he's in our studio. Shot terrorists and makes whiskey. I don't know other qualifications you need to be governor of Virginia. I'm for that. Hey, Denver, you're in the house. Good to have you with us, man.
Good morning. Thank you, John.
And thanks for being with us. Already got a suggestion here from George in Newport News, who says, along with whiskey, you ought to be selling bagels. Riggleman's Bagel Shop at the distillery. That's Slumlord George missing his bagels from New York, I guess. Why don't you get in the bagel business?
I guess. Bagels.
Whiskey, bagels, and lox.
I think it'd be fantastic. I've had bagels and whiskey before, and I think he's on to something.
He might be on to something. Slumlord George from Newport News. You had a big press conference, Denver, yesterday. What happened?
Well,
in Richmond, at the State House.
At the State House. No, Chap Peterson had put a bill out I thought was pretty good for the people of Virginia, where it talked about limiting lobbying dollars from Dominion and other public utilities to our legislators, and I went up there to support it. But what I found out the night before is that they pulled the bill quietly before I could get there. So a
quiet death?
A quiet death, which seems like there's a lot of quiet deaths in our legislature. When you can table bills without voice vote, with just voice vote, that seems to happen a lot. But I still want to go up there and support Chap. Like I said, Democrat or Republican, it doesn't matter. If you have a good idea when it comes to integrity and transparency for our legislature, I'm going to support it.
Okay, so you've been running for governor now officially about 3 weeks.
3 weeks,
right?
Yeah.
About 3 weeks.
Yes. Feels like 3 months.
Feels like 3 months.
Yeah.
What have you learned?
Well, I've learned it's much more difficult than I thought. I can be honest and transparent about it. I know that many of these folks have done it for some time, run for office. It takes a bit of mental constitution to get through some of these days. You know what I think about, John, was when my daughter was in kindergarten, I got asked to go do a tug-of-war against 30 kindergartners and a teacher named Miss Williams. And here I was, 1997. I was actually in shape then. I could run and jump. Yeah, I was 27 then. So I thought 30 kindergartners would be an easy tug of war. They asked me to pull against these kindergartners in front of hundreds of people this field day. I got my butt kicked. When you have 30 kindergartners and a teacher that weighs between 150 and 160 as the anchor, I don't know the amazing amount of foot pressure or foot-pounds of pressure they put against me, but they almost ripped my arms out of my socket. It seems like right now in these 3 weeks, I've found myself in some days pulling against kindergartners. There's 30 people yelling at you. You think you're the good guy, you're strong enough to do it, but you realize you have to have a really good team behind you to pull against all these kindergartners. Mm-hmm. So it feels like right now, being a conservative in this state, it's you against 30 kindergartners and the histrionics that go with it. So that's what I've learned in the 3 weeks, that I've done is I'm pulling against kindergartners, but thank God I have a great team and people that support me because it has been one heck of an experience for me.
So let's get to some of your key issues. We talked about Dominion a little bit. That's kind of dead because it's the Chap Peterson bill gone now. One of your big issues, though, is the number of regulations in Virginia that you say are strangling small businesses and job creation. Denver Riggleman, can you elaborate on that?
I can. I had something happen yesterday, and I just want to go through this, and I think people will understand. This is a small analogy on everything I've gone through since not only building a manufacturing facility is what a distillery is, but also with what I did in the DOD. So I went yesterday, I had to adjust a boundary between my own property. I'd cut out a piece of my own property for the distillery, and I had to adjust the boundary by 0.06 acres. So I went up there. We had the county approve it, which took a couple days. Longer than that. We had to pay fees for that, right? You had to pay fees to do this. $800 for a survey fee to adjust it. I go up there. The lady takes it, and she goes, well, my goodness, we don't see that you have a legal sort of a legal opinion from a lawyer about a change in boundary. I said, well, the county approved this change of boundary, based on
The county approved it.
The county had already approved it. She goes, well, when you're selling from one person to another or transferring property, you now need, because of the Supreme Court of Virginia, which who knows, she said you need a legal document. You need to go hire a lawyer to talk about a small change in boundary between a possession change between two people. I said, ma'am, I'm Denver Riggleman giving it to Denver Riggleman. So she just gave me this blank stare. She goes, well, that'll be $92. So it took us about a half an hour to an hour to get it straightened out that we didn't need two more documents. We didn't need to have a legal opinion, which as you know, lawyers are not cheap. And finally she goes, well, I'll just have you fill this out, put all this in. So we had 30 minutes more of paperwork, still not sure. And again, I said, have you ever had an instance where a person was just changing their own boundary? Why would we need a legal precedent or some kind of legal document that's going to cost me another $1,000 to change my own boundary?
Right.
She couldn't answer the question. Those type of things are happening. We have so many layers of bureaucracy and so many layers of sort of administrivia that it gets to a point you sort of step back and say, well, how do we change this? How do you change this whole culture in this state, in this commonwealth, where every single thing we do is managed by a bureaucrat, usually faceless, but it's also a stratification of fees that always stop you from growing a business. And I got to tell you, we win in the Commonwealth despite the government, not because of it. And wouldn't it be something if somebody came along and said, hey, instead of reform, let's dismantle some of these regulations that makes no sense.
Okay, you're running as an outsider, obviously not a politician, no government experience. About an hour ago, we had on State Senator from Virginia Beach, Republican Frank Wagner, one of your rivals for governor, who criticized the other candidates, you included, and said the exact opposite. Look, I'm the only guy that's up in Richmond to figure this out. All these other people, they talk a big game. They have no idea what's going on. I'm the guy that can get things done because I understand the system. I've been in Richmond for a very long time, and I know how it works, so I can get things done. How do you respond to that?
Well, good for Frank. Yeah, great. So Richmond's doing really well the last decade or so, hasn't it? As our GDP sinks, I've said it before, you said something like no hashtag. It's almost like hashtag pinnacle of mediocrity. We have people say, well, we're doing okay. We're 33rd in GDP growth. We're the 13th best state instead of the first state. So great job. If mediocre is what you want on your resume for the last 10 to 15 years, that's good for you. I don't even have time to deal with that time of criticism right now. I think what we have is we have to just, sort of go in the battlefield of ideas and issues. And, but yeah, good for Frank. He's a state legislature, never run for state office before either. And probably my resume, I'll match that up against anybody as far as my experience.
Denver, in a Roanoke poll just out the other day, let's start with politics, then we'll get to policy. Let's just get the elephant out of the room. Roanoke poll comes out, your name ID. In that poll, 1%. You're way behind in fundraising, name ID. Nobody's heard of you. Who is this guy? The primary, June 13th. That's 5 months away. How do you go from 1% to get in this race and then perhaps win the June primary? Because looking at you now, you've got to be seen as a very significant underdog.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's why I'm here today, and we've been all over the state. Yesterday, I think we traveled about 500 miles. Really, it's a ground game, but we have, about 4.5 months until the primary. I think I've been in exercises and experiments and operations in the military. We did a lot of damage in 4.5 months. So it's about an aggressive ground game. A little bit of air cover, too, and we're doing that right now, right? We're on the air. This is my air cover. Get out to people, explain my ideas. It is the battlefield of ideas. Stick to my guns, no pun intended, and do the best that I can to express what I want to do for the people in the state of Virginia. Good news. It seems like people are taking to that message. I think we just had a bearing drift poll where I was second, 28%, which was pretty surprising to me. So I'm humble about it, but I need to get the message out based on my personal experiences and what I want to do for the Commonwealth.
And when you say what you want to do from the Commonwealth, give me some of the key issues in the 3.5 minutes right now that we have, some of the key issues that separate your own policies out from Wagner, Gillespie, Stewart.
Right. I think, number one, I'm probably not the only one not going to get funding from Dominion or any of the big lobbyists. I think I'm probably the candidate that stresses transparency more than any of them. anti-corruption, but also how do we use the governor's mansion to lessen the tax burden at the local level, whether it's stopping unfunded mandates, whether it's trying to streamline or dismantle or get rid of regulations for small businesses that are extremely ridiculous. There's some things some people don't talk about that they're afraid to. Number one, we actually have regulatory agencies in the state of Virginia that fund themselves off fines and fees. They're incentivized to go after citizens. That is the definition, I think the technical definition in the dictionary of a self-licking ice cream cone. So once you look at self-licking ice cream cone, under the Oxford Dictionary, it says State of Virginia regulatory agencies. I think we need to just go after and start to dismantle some of that. As far as tax structures, it's sort of funny. We now hear people talking about the North Carolina tax plan. I think we need to streamline our taxes, but we need a forensic audit of every single state department in Virginia. We need to make sure that the gazintas and the gazaltas are matching up, and right now with the deficit or with the debt that seems to be hanging over Virginia every friggin' year, somebody's not doing their job, whether they're bean counters, accountants, or politicians who are making economic decisions based on a lack of economic sense in any respect. That has to change. And I believe some people are afraid to talk about the way that lobbyists and donors control the vote in the House, in the delegate, in the Senate, and in the House of Delegates.
Let's get to Senator Frank Wagner on my show last month called for perhaps a 5% gasoline tax, saying that we have to get these roads fixed in Virginia. We have a crumbling infrastructure. People are sitting in traffic. And so he said, look, 5% gasoline tax now, gasoline prices down. North Carolina has it. They've got the best roads basically in the entire mid-Atlantic region. He's right. How do you stand on that and why?
Well, what I would ask, if you're looking at it from a business sense, is what happened to the $384 million spent over the last 10 years from one-off taxpayer-funded economic development funds. You just put that in an account at 5%, I believe, over 10 years. We have $625 million. They have no ROI. So I would ask some of the politicians in the last 10 years, if you're worried about infrastructure, why are you giving them money away based on who's putting a hand in your pocket? So I think there's a lot of wasteful spending. Why don't we do this? Now, this sounds crazy, John, so get prepared for this.
Go ahead. We like crazy.
This is crazy. Why don't we look at the wasteful spending first before we think about raising taxes? Oh, I know that's crazy.
That's insane.
It's insanity.
You can't do that.
So, and it just goes, hey.
We need the waste.
Well, we do. Plus,
Slump.
yeah, it is. And plus, if you're tax increases, what does that do? We do want to fix infrastructure, but it also helps developers. So let's look at who's giving the money to whom, how much we actually have. Do we have to do all these taxpayer-funded sort of boondoggles that seem to be the way of the Commonwealth in the last few years? Let's not talk about the $1.4 million to the Chinese. So before we talk about a gasoline tax, how about we talk about seeing if we cut spending first? How about an audit? How about we look at what departments need to be not only maybe restructured, but how about this? How about we end some of the ineffective departments in the Commonwealth first? I know this is crazy talk. I know this is nutty. But the first thing a politician seems to want to do when they have a problem is let's go get money from the taxpayers. That is because that's what they've done for 25 years. I think that was the number you gave me on Frank's experience, right?
Yes,
so,
25 years.
So great, 25 years. Great. Hey, great. So you want a 5% tax increase on gas for infrastructure. Why don't we see if we can pull that money from somewhere else first that's being ineffectively used? Again, crazy talk, I know.
Lunacy. This is from Larry in Richmond, who says, the self-licking ice cream cone may be the best metaphor for bureaucracy I have ever heard in my life. Virginia has enough politicians. We need a working man. Worked for Trump. Larry in Richmond. So you got a fan.
Thanks, Larry.
Right there. You want to weigh in. Denver, let's get to what Trump did over the weekend. I know you weighed in on this as far. You were in Intel. You were Air Force. Intel, you were the planner of our attack in Afghanistan after 9/11. You planned it. Basically, what Trump said is, I'm not satisfied with the vetting process. Here's 7 countries. They're bad actors. Nobody's coming in for a while. The Democrats' hysteria yesterday, Mark Herring, Attorney General, press conference saying this is not who we are. He's going to fight him. What do you make of this whole thing?
Well, it is who we are. So I don't think a lot of people have read the executive order. Section 3, subsections, I think A, D, and E, talks about the adjudication of data and the issues that we have with data sharing with these countries of interest. If you talk to a lot of analysts, if they're doing vetting, if they're doing social network analysis, the biggest issue they have is garbage in, garbage out. If you got data coming in that's not matching or it's not real or it's not vetted, you can't do the necessary analysis to ensure that the person you're looking at is actually the person you're looking at. And there's some ways to say it. There's non-productized data, there's raw data, you even have data that's sort of non-geolocated data. All this is what vetting people have to deal with, analysts, people that are on the front lines. So if you have a 90-day pause to make sure that your vetting procedures are okay, and you allow people to come in after those 90 days, once you have a new technology that's online, do we now call this the Muslim pause instead of the Muslim ban? And so those are some of the things that I would love to ask people is, did you read Section 3? Did you read the adjudication of data portion of the executive order? Have you been in analysis a long time to know that these 7 countries have awful infrastructures? Mm-hmm. Whether it's through bombing or bad things, they have awful infrastructures, or they have a closed society like Iran that they will not share data with us when we're doing vetting of refugees. So at some point, they either have to share the data better with us, or we have to have a better technology, better technologies and better data aggregation technologies in order to do this. And that's been being worked on for years. And to say this wasn't started beforehand, I think people need to look at third offset technology started by President Obama's administration, 2013, 2014, 2015, where we've been trying to do better large data analysis based on funding through other programs. So this is something that's been going on for some time. This wasn't a surprise to me. We know we have issues with data. We know we have issues with infrastructure. In Section 3, if you read adjudication of data in the executive order, an analyst is going to look at that and say, oh, man, we needed to do some work to make sure that we're not letting bad actors into the country.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense to me, and I think the hysteria was misplaced, and especially I thought Mark Herring's press conference yesterday, the Attorney General of Virginia, was very disingenuous. To say after the fact, it's like jumping on the bandwagon, and it's like the entire Democratic Party now in Virginia, to me, they're all moving to way out of the mainstream, right?
Yeah.
To the far, to the extreme left, right?
Even to the point, I think Mark's middle name is Red. Mark Red Herring, I think, is that what we need to know him by now. And, this is really a ridiculous argument because, again, okay, so I'll tell you this. In 1998, when I went through Intel school, I had to memorize all 193 countries in the world. So 7 of 50 Muslim countries are being affected, more or less. It might be 49 or 50, depending on who's looking at the population. And 8% of the entire Muslim population. So Indonesia alone, the size of their country dwarfs the 7 countries in question for Muslim population. So I think what's happening is you have hysteria and you have the politicization of something. If I said that right, it's tough to have that many syllables this early in the morning, John. But, we have this politics of histrionics. And again, we're pulling against kindergartners. And the second thing, and one of the greatest sayings from my old colonel is he said, Denver, he's from Louisiana, so it's going to be an awful accent. Denver, don't let the piss ants crawl up your combat boots. So what you have is you have a bunch of piss ants crawling up the combat boots of people trying to do a job in this country, and you get frickin' pissed about it.
Well, I can certainly understand that. You got a text here from David in Virginia Beach who says, no more career politicians. They set things up to assure their own jobs and prosperity. I support Denver Riggleman. So there you go. Now, you guys have got a meet and greet set up today, right?
We do.
Where is that?
At the Panera.
Tell the audience about that.
Yeah, Panera Coffee Shop. I wish I could remember the address. I got Josiah right here, but I think it's only a few minutes.
Battlefield Boulevard.
Battlefield Boulevard, yes. So just drinking coffee with people and talking, because I think that's what normal people do. Talk with just nice and, share ideas and drink coffee.
Average people having a conversation. Let's go to the phone lines. David in North Carolina. David, you're on the air.
How you doing, John?
Never
better. You have a great show.
Thank you.
Denver.
Yes, how you doing, David?
Yes, finally we get to speak. Got a quick question for you, something that's come up in the campaign. You're a small business owner. How do you, and what you're doing is awesome, but how do you then reach across the kitchen table and touch the majority of Virginians that are 9-to-5 workers.
Right. I think how you touch them, and not in any kind of weird way, but actually how we get out and we talk to them is through making sure that they understand that we understand that their burdens. Even as a small business owner, I employ a lot of people, David, and so the good thing about this and what I'm excited about is that we could tell them, listen, your life is important, and you shouldn't be saddled with a tax structure that continually stops you from enjoying your life after you get off your 9-to-5 job, and you have all the issues that come with that. And I think the reason that's such a pertinent question is because, David, I mean, let's be honest, I was a 9-to-5 guy well before I ever tried to start a company. Whether it was military, whether it was being a roofer, whether it was putting in doors, all those things, I was so blue collar, even when I enlisted in the military, that I understand some of those issues that 9-to-5ers have. And I hope when they look at somebody like me coming out of from the working field, I actually have a few calluses. I've wore steel-toe boots before. I would hope they say, listen, this guy's worried about our lives and the taxes that we have to pay and the things that we got to go through every day to make sure that we feed our families. I think that's, again, we have to look at the tax issues that we have in this state and see if we can dismantle some of those tax structures that are hurting the 9-to-5 workers and maybe flatlining the income tax so they understand what they're going to pay every year rather than guessing on the things they got to do as they go forward. So, David, I do appreciate the question, but I guess I'm the 9-to-5 guy here. So thanks for that wheelhouse question, David. I appreciate it.
Thanks, David.
Hey, thank you. Doing whatever it takes.
All right. Thank you,
You got
David.
it.
Let's get to Den in Chesapeake. Den, you're on the air.
Yes, Denver. Good to hear your comments, and of course, you are coming out of a situation which is, no name recognition, if you would. So I hope that you will continue getting on John Fredericks Show and other things to really help that out in a hurry. But my question would be, or comment would be, that Donald Trump, to me, has distinguished himself to come out of nowhere to the top by virtue of not only saying precisely what he'll do, but the beauty of it is to distinguish him from other politicians, even the ones that are running for governor here. He's going to say exactly how he's going to do it. And they never say that in general. They just say, well, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, but he says how. So I guess I'm asking, do you have that? I haven't seen your website, but do you have a list of what you want to do and also some clues about how to do it out there? And
Yes.
if you don't, that certainly distinguishes Donald Trump from the rest, I believe.
Yeah, he came out running, I think, because he saw things wrong in the country. On my website, under the issues, I believe the issues tab, it outlines specifically what I'm looking at as far as tax structures, reform, everything, social issues. I tried to be pretty specific based on my baseline of knowledge. I tell you the thing, I believe that frightens people before you make any decisions. I had a general mindset, Denver, always wait 3 months when you get in a new job to see what's going on before you make rash decisions. For me, if once I'm governor, I want to go in and look at every single state department and their spending lines. And after those 3 months, that is when we start looking at how we can cut taxes. You have, I think politicians want to come out and say, I'm going to do this, 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 and this, regardless of what's going on in the Commonwealth at the time. Why don't you have a governor that goes in, before I say I'm going to do this, this, and this specifically, why don't I go in and do a study period? I've already talked to the guys who do forensic auditing. I've been through DCAA audits, which are government audits of a business based on regulatory issues, which I'm very familiar with. Mm-hmm. So at some point, when you talk about how you're going to change things, the first things you got to change is the culture of how the Commonwealth does business. And you do that by seeing who's spending, who's giving money to legislatures, and why our laws are written the way they are. So I think you take the first 90 days as governor to see what's going on, who's playing, what's happening, look at the spending, and then make decisions on the taxes you want to cut and how you want to restructure and reform the regulatory burdens for Virginians. And I believe that's just a sober way of looking at it. And just because I'm a distiller, that wasn't a pun using sober, but I think that's how I look at it, Den.
Okay, well, that sounds good, but again, concentrate on being specifics. My wife, who's not a real politician of sorts, but she is fond, right or wrong, I was saying, with regard to Mr. Gillespie, that she feels he's too Washington. So you're not too Washington, that's for sure. Bless you.
No,
okay.
sir. Yeah, thank you so much, Den. Is Den short for Dennis or Den? My name's Denver, so a lot of people call me Den. What is that short for?
They called me Dennis when I came out of the womb, but I just became Den, like Bear's Den.
Well, hey, man, thanks for calling. Hey, Den, from Den to Den, thanks for calling, buddy.
All right, Den to Den. We want to thank
Okay,
Den.
yeah, over now.
Thank
you.
Den in Chesapeake. Okay, let's get to Jimmy on the peninsula. Jimmy, you're on the air. You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network. You're with Republican gubernatorial candidate Denver Riggleman. Go ahead. You're on the air,
Hey,
Jimmy.
can you hear me? I can't
Yes,
hear
sir.
y'all.
I'm good. Go ahead.
Hey, all right. Well, I got hardly any volume coming for you. First of all, thank you for your service to the country. I
Thank
think
you,
you
Jimmy.
do in my experience, you veterans do a great job at whatever second career that you've reinvented yourself to do. I heard yesterday my wife had her Facebook pulled up, and there was the governor and the attorney general were talking about some action they're going to do against Trump's executive order. What do you think about that?
I think it's histrionics. I think it's a political move based on the party that they represent. And Jimmy, really, I could be blunt about it. It doesn't make a lot of sense because the United States is allowed to vet any refugees coming into this country on the way they want to do it. It goes back to 1952 and the law that was passed by a majority of Democrats. Is that that's just histrionics and somebody trying to score points with voters in Virginia. It's that simple.
All right. I want to
Okay,
thank.
that's what I thought it sounded like to me.
Yeah, it's
I'm
thrashing. It's the thrashing of people who lost a national election is how I look at it.
Yeah, I mean, it's happening all over the country. I heard John play the blather of, was that the mayor of San Francisco or
Yep.
their, okay.
How about the
Yeah,
mayor
it's
of
just-
Charlottesville? The mayor of Charlottesville saying they were the center of liberal resistance now. And
I
yeah,
didn't hear that.
Oh yeah, the city of Charlottesville's saying they're going to be a sanctuary city. That's where I went to school, so they're going to be surprised when I'm governor how that goes down for them.
All right.
Well, I bet you the people that actually work and pay taxes there have a whole different opinion than the mayor as well.
I think they do because the protesters got in the way of the ice cream store down there on the mall. You know, that really does piss people off, let me tell you.
I hear you. Okay,
All right. I
well,
want to thank
Thanks, Jimmy.
Jimmy from the peninsula. Thank you, Jimmy. Let's get to Joseph in Suffolk. Joseph, you're on the air with Republican gubernatorial candidate Denver Riggleman.
Hey, Denver, I like the idea of trimming the fat here in Virginia. I'll tell you, as you know, a lot of these agencies are created just for jobs. That's all they're there for.
They are. You're exactly right. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and then once they create these jobs to put these people in, then they could tell them how to think with diversity training. So then they got them brainwashed, so there's more robots running around. So go ahead and get rid of them. I'm all for that.
Hey, Joseph.
One other thing.
Oh, sure. Go ahead,
the
Joseph.
The primaries are when? When did you say, John?
June 13th.
Yeah, so we got April, which is the Wakefield shad planking. You familiar with the shad planking, Denver?
Yeah, I used to do that with my grandfather, Robert Vale. We would actually, the amount of shad that man would get so we would take those big old nets down there, and so many, it's so amazing that for 3 years, you just said shad. I just had a flashback to 1983 to 1985, so you just sort of blew me away
Nice.
there, Joseph.
I love that. It's a great function. But anyways, feel free to set up a tent there, and you'll have your product. Plus, you can go ahead and schmooze. People get to know you. I tell you, I voted for Miller when he ran against Ollie North. He had a Miller tent serving beer. So he had my vote. So there you go. If you want, it's a good idea. So hey, we'll call it Shots with Denver.
No, it would be fantastic. I think I'm going to take a shot at doing that with you at the shad planking. And also, in a bit of an analogy, when you're catching shad, to me, it's like sort of catching politicians in a net. I think shad planking would be a pretty good analogy for our campaign. But, man, Joseph, you just brought back some memories. You just made my morning. Thank you, brother.
All right.
Good.
I want to thank Joseph.
I'll be the guy walking around with two beers. I always have one in each hand. My hands get lonely drinking by themselves at Wakefield. So you'll know me by that.
Joseph, we need to get one of those hats, where you have the hat with the beer in the hat and it goes straight into your mouth.
They get warm.
They get warm. Joseph doesn't like that. All right, so we're gonna get Denver Riggleman. He's gonna get a setup right at Shad Planking and serve his own whiskey, right? That's what I think you should do.
I think this is probably the best idea of the morning. I think not just like pairing bagels and whiskey this morning. I think we can also pair shad with a nice rye. I think that would be a very nice thing to do there. And by the way, Joseph, I'm a fan of Double Fister beer drinkers. I'm from Appalachia, so you would fit right in with the family. Thanks.
Well,
buddy.
in Appalachia, they put the beer in breakfast cereal, right? Beer and
That's right.
cornflakes.
But it is granola, so it's healthy. Come
My
on, John.
cousin did that one time when he got up. I'm like, what the hell are you doing?
That's right.
I guess he said that solved his hangover issue. But look, you need to set that up at Shad Planking. And then when you call them and you set it up, tell them be sure this year they don't run out of Shad Plank and whatever else they had at 3 o'clock,
Amen.
which Joseph and I are still mad at. Let's go to Larry in Richmond. Larry, you're on the air with Denver Riggleman.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, Larry.
Yeah, Mr. Riggleman, I'm also a fellow Appalachian American, so it's nice to have somebody running for office that talks like us. So good for you.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
If you find yourself up in Richmond, I'd like to catch up with you, shake hands with you, introduce myself. You got my support, sir.
Thank you, Larry.
I have a question about property taxes. I know it's probably more of a locality issue, but those of us that own land or maybe even have a home that's a higher assessed value, we're having our butt handed to us, if you will, lack of a better term, in taxes. But I have equal rights as everybody else. I pay, so I have unequal taxes but equal rights. So how do we spread that burden out amongst the citizenry and make it more fair for everyone?
Well, there's a couple states that have addressed that issue by trying to do a more broad-based tax using sales tax, and then trying to lower the state income tax, and by proportion the personal property taxes for all property owners. So you're sort of hitting the issues that I've had, Larry. And one of the reasons why I'm running is because of those taxes. And I don't know if you have a business on your property too, Larry, but not only am I paying property tax, but I'm paying business personal property tax, and some localities are paying a self-employment tax. So I think at some level we have to change the culture of the local administrators and say, listen, you're spending too much money. And I think that culture of people like me running for office, Larry, is that you got to get your local legislators to stop wasting money on things that aren't really needed for the citizenry. For example, in Nelson County, we got a great county of 15 or 16,000 people, Larry. That's it. But it seems like we have a $25 million Taj Mahal Center, city building that really isn't representative of what's going on in Nelson County. So I think a lot of it is that these local legislators also believe that taxpayers are there to fund them and their jobs, and there needs to be an activist revolution at the grassroots level to change these type of people. And what we have to do in Richmond is cut spending there. We have to make sure we flatline the taxes, make them simpler to understand, and then stop the unfunded mandates to counties. I think that will get to the counties eventually, there just has to be some relief on property taxes because we're not building jobs in the Commonwealth either. As our GDP goes down, the local legislators raise property taxes so they can keep the revenue coming in for their own pockets and for the things they have to do. So it's a vicious cycle. So let's increase jobs in Virginia so that taxes don't continually increase on property owners. Let's have businesses in here paying taxes rather than you, Larry, and me, because let me tell you, on my business personal property and property taxes, it's significant, and I got a feeling it's significant for you, and you're tired of it.
All right. I want to thank Larry in Richmond. Only got a couple more minutes with Denver Riggleman. Let's go to Joe in Chesapeake. Joe, you're on the air.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Riggleman. I know of a person who has been absolutely persecuted by the injustice system of the state. It involves every level you can think of. It involves the former governor, the Attorney General's office, the Supreme Court, the state police, and you name it, everything in between. The guy is charged falsely, and yet he has been convicted, a couple of convictions. I want to know, if you are governor, would you attempt to straighten out this extreme injustice?
Well, I tell you, I'd have to know more about that extreme injustice before I straighten it out. Because
well, look, may I send you some information concerning that?
Absolutely. Please send it to denver@denverforgovernor.com. That is my email.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Joe.
bud.
All right, let's go to Slumlord George in Newport News. Slumlord, you're on the air. Hey, Slumlord.
All right, is this the
Wait a
famous?
minute. Wait a minute.
We've always thought this would be a good name for a bagel place, Riggleman's Bagels. So that's going to be the next endeavor. But I was asking.
Wait a minute,
I
Joe.
want to
Wait a
know
minute,
where
George.
Where is the boozery? where is the boozeria in Charlottesville? Because the wife and I, we always go out there in the fall. We go to Carter's Mountain Vineyard, and we sure would like to stop and obviously, not get in trouble drinking and driving, but we would have to stop by the whiskey house here.
Right, and we're about 25 minutes from Carter's Mountain. That's off exit 124, so you just want to go down to exit 107, take 250 to 151, and we're in Afton, Virginia, 9374 Rockfish Valley Highway, Afton, Virginia, George.
Outstanding. Well, we'll definitely visit you when we're on one of our journeys, but I like the fact that you're sort of a fiscal conservative. I think we've got to cut spending if we want to get all this stuff under control. So you sound like the type of person that wants to do that, and I like that. So you've got my vote, buddy, and I'll stop by and have a few shots of your good stuff.
Hey, George, I look forward to it. I've done that a few times myself, so maybe we could do it together.
Hey, George.
All right, buddy. Thank
George,
you very much, Denver.
I can't believe you got by my call screener, Michael, because, George, I looked up on the internet, and I didn't see your 2 tickets for my fundraiser. I didn't see your name on the list. Did you go under a separate name? Because I looked, I didn't see it.
Extorted for this baseball.
Until you buy 2 tickets.
Do something.
Until you buy 2 tickets to my fundraiser, George. I'm sorry, but you're banned.
I doubt that, seriously.
Just go on johnfredericksradio.com.
Good luck.
And
good luck,
buy
Denver.
2. I'm going to George.
Thank you, George.
George, I'm going to tell Coach Bobby today you wouldn't buy 2 tickets to our Tidewater Bombers fundraiser. So when you go in there, you're going to have to deal with him.
Please don't get me banned from the batting cage. He runs a great operation down there, I tell you. My son loves it quite a bit down there.
All right, George. Thank you. All right, Denver Riggleman's out of time. He's got to go to his meet and greet, which is an Panera Bread. Want to thank everybody for weighing in. This is the John Fredericks Radio Network. And, okay, I've got one text here you have to answer. Corey in Danville says, yo, John, before he goes, for those of us who missed the kickoff, will there be another event at the distillery, Denver?
Yes. Not quite sure when, but yes, there will be. And there's an event every Saturday at the distillery. And that event is, or every day that we're open, come see us. And I usually still serve drinks on Saturday because my wife and I own it. So if I'm not on the road on Saturdays, I work.
All right.
So you can come see me.